it's got to be a Unity object, which means you can specify what assets to return, but if you say like that type was like an integer, then the compiler will say no, this is only for creating Unity objects. So that's what this bit here says. All right. Now, first of all, we're gonna use this get assets path function. Get asset path. So we say return get asset paths. Pass in the folder path. All right. And then once we have those asset paths, for each of them we're gonna load an asset. So dot select, that's going to be a path asset database, which in fact has its own, let's see, load asset at path has its own generic function where we can pass in that type and the path. And we'll change that to an array. All right, I'll just backtrack a bit, see what's going on here. So Unity has their own generic function, which would look a bit similar to what this is, right? Where it says load asset at path, and whatever type you pass in there, that's the type that's going to be returned to you. So this will be an array of meshes or an array of game objects. So now we can say we can have our meshes. So we can say asset utility dot load, what was it? So get assets at path, pass in the folder path, and we're going to specify that we want only the meshes. So for example, if you had a folder that had meshes and game objects in it, it'll only return the meshes, which means it's a very robust way of doing this thing. Okay, so now that we have our meshes, we need to turn those into game objects. So let's go ahead and create a game object for each of them. So we'll have a game object, create mesh game object. We're going to pass in that mesh, and we're also going to pass in the parent. Mesh, and the parent. All right, so we're going to create a game object which will hold that mesh inside it, and it'll also have a mesh renderer where we can specify what type of material we want it to use. Okay, so we say var go equals new game object. We can give it the same name as the mesh's name. We're going to set its parent, go.transform.parent equals parent, and we're also going to give it a mesh filter and a mesh renderer. Okay. So we say go.addComponent mesh filter. All right, and this function return. This is just a little shorthand. This will return that mesh filter, and then we can set the mesh of it. .mesh equals mesh. We're also going to need a mesh renderer. So go.addComponent mesh renderer. And we're going to want to set the material of this renderer, and so let's create a new public variable, material, and so now we can set for each of these meshes that we're procedurally creating, we'll set what material it'll use, equals material. All right, and then we can return that game object. In fact, we don't really need to. This is like a bit strange. Okay, so because we've got our parent prefab,